Oh, so, so we're talking about elements. So elements are connected to the flavor world, and elements are connected to the astrology world, right? So Taurus is a fixed earth sign. So there's 4 elements. What are the 4 elements again? Earth,
Fire,
air, water,
metal,
fire.
metal.
In the 5 element system, replaces air. Metal and wood replace air in the 5 element. And those are the 4 elements, at least that we in the West are familiar with. And so each of the astrology signs embodies one of those elements. There's water signs, earth signs, air signs, fire signs. And then they also embody either a cardinal or a very driving like yang force. They're mutable or changeable, or they're fixed. So Taurus is a fixed earth sign. It's the most dense of all the signs, because earth is the most dense element and fixed is the most dense. It's not mutable, it's not cardinal, it's straight up fixed earth. So the Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign, meaning they initiate. So Capricorn's always, my brother, Chris, I love you, always have an agenda. All my Capricorn girlfriends, it's like we'd be all lovey-dovey, snuggling in bed, and in 1 second it would turn into business mind. It's like, wait, I want the snuggler. Wait, I want that one back. Oh no, I'm out the door now. Bye. For the Taurus, fixed earth. Takes a long time to change, like a tugboat tugging a big ship. Change is not good. So in the Taurus mind, it came up with Shahid. He wanted to do something new. And every time in my life, when something new is proposed, there's a contraction and a no.
For Taurus.
Because I'm a Taurus. That's the natural reaction to change. And then, well, I have they're all in my Taurus planets are in the Aquarian house. So there's a weird paradox of like, part of me goes, wait a minute, stop that. Let's analyze the situation or feel into it. And then the answer will often change a few moments later, or a few minutes or hours later. Because if you have a cardinal sign, so what's the cardinal fire sign? Aries. Yeah. So you've got fire, and it's a fire on fire. Oh boy. My mother was an Aries, and she was a powerful lady. So powerful that when we were children, my dad would take us out when she was on her moon sometimes. If she was on her moon, on the full moon, we left for the evening. Because it was just fire in the house.
Just the one night?
And my dad was a conflict avoider. He was a Cancer. So here was this cardinal fire sign, but my father was a Cancer. I didn't know it, but as a child, about age 6, I was like listening to them interact. And I was like, they're not going to make it. It's like, this is just not a good match. At age 6, I knew that. They divorced when I was 11. I knew. It was like, then I saw the astrology when I was later. It was like, oh. My mom was one social, wanted to go out there, and my dad would work hard for the family and come home and want to sit in front of the box. Mm. And so they were always at odds because he needed to chill and she wanted to go out. She's with the kids all day.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's not good. Okay, back to the salt. Let's pass. So take that one, a little pinch first, and then take this one after. If you need to rinse your mouth out between, that helps too.
Clean your palate.
Clean the palate. One's a little more pink than the other, so you could say which one you think is more sweet or flavor-wise, what you think. So if you're watching this, we're sending around, or you're just listening to it in the, while you're walking around the house, we're sending around, so we're doing a better job with that at least. We're sending around 2 types of salt. And I started doing this, I graduated from SoCal High School here in this county in 1983. So when I was an alumni and I got my nutrition degree, they invited me, or I invited myself to talk to the health classes and do like a guest presentation. And it's a marketing technique to put you in the limelight for the local people too. But I brought in Morton iodized salt in one dish and my Celtic sea salt in another dish for clueless high school students. So what do you think? What do you think they said with the Morton? A unanimous with clueless teenagers. Unanimous, they picked out the Morton iodized salt as tasting bitter and chemically and the Celtic as sweet and a very broad salty profile flavor.
They all said it.
Every single one of them caught it. They didn't know what it was, but they could see that. That's why any chef who's worth his weight in anything, at the very minimum, has that that rock salt that you see those boxes they used to use the rock salt in the restaurants. They have a high quality salt because the high quality salts have a very broad flavor profile. The refined salts have a bitter, chemically sharp flavor. And that's why you hear about hypertension and edema. That's the natural inflammatory response to the chemical-based salt. These raw sea salts, in 35 years of getting them out, I have never seen a case of high blood pressure or edema. And I've given them out to people with edema and high blood pressure, and it never aggravated it either. So I can tell you with 100% confidence that it will not provoke a reaction unless you overdo it. Because if you oversalt meat, what happens to it?
Shrinks up.
And turns into beef jerky. And so will you if you do too much salt.
Is that like
Good thing I know.
old and crusty?
That's right. That's too much salt.
Yeah.
You'll see it in the eyes too. There's something called a sodium ring. There's a cholesterol ring, a sodium ring, and a lipemic ring. That's one of the things I'm going to start. Wouldn't that be neat to see like different photos, different eyes, and what they mean on the website? We've been talking about that today. Like, that's a really interesting tidbit. Did anybody see the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So which one's more bitter, which one's more sweet? The pinker one or the whiter one?
The first one's, the whiter one is bitter and the pink one's sweet.
Sweet pink. Anybody else
Yeah.
want to differ? Everybody agree?
The second one was sweet.
That was the whiter one.
Yeah.
You think the whiter one's sweeter?
The one on the box.
No,
was
the
lighter
second.
one.
I thought the pinker one was
That's
sweeter.
that's the one on the box.
Yeah, there's the pink one.
That was number one.
The big one was first, the round lid one, or the square box one.
The round one was first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one on the box was second.
I'll tell you what they are in a second. Got too much. What else? So I'm tasting the salt, and
That's the salty one.
this is the whiter one now.
Do you think that's whiter than the other?
Come look in the light, Drew. One's a lot pinker than the other.
Oh, yeah.
So the first one was pinker, right?
Yeah.
I can see that, yeah.
So this salt here is a high potassium salt. It's the one I was in the little square boxes. That's for the electrolyte drink. This is another electrolyte mix. This one is, I'll plug these guys. This is out of Mexico. I got this tip from a friend of a friend, and I went to this website, and these are Americans that moved down to, I guess, Colima, Mexico. And there were people doing real old style salt harvesting. And this salt is extremely white, which means it's extremely pure, like the Celtic flower of the ocean. And it's twice as much as the Celtic flower of the ocean. So I got it on sale for 50% off, which put it at the same price as the flower of the ocean retail. But I bought it, a couple of pounds of it, because it was talked up by chefs. There was like a bunch of testimonials from chefs. And I was like, oh, I gotta try this. And it's just unbelievable in the food. So this one leaves no bitter aftertaste. This one has the potassium bitter because it has literally 100 times more potassium in this one.
So which one is closest to this?
This one's closer to that.
Okay.
Very little potassium in that product there. A little bit, a couple milligrams.
So both are good.
Both are good. So when I flavor food with this pinker one, it definitely isn't as good as when I flavor with this one.
Mm.
Because it's potassium in it, it makes the food more bitter. This makes, so we all have different taste buds though. Some of us have more bitter taste buds, some of us have more sour taste buds, some of us more sweet taste buds, salty, blah, blah, blah. And the taste buds also vary where they are in our tongue. So some of us I didn't eat, so my sense of taste is really enhanced right now. Most of you guys just ate, right?
Right.
The other interesting thing to do would be to take your mouth pH, your saliva pH, and take a salt crystal and dilute it, and chew on the salt crystal, and then a minute or two later take your mouth pH again. Theoretically, it should get more alkaline because the salt's alkaline.
How do they compare to Celtic salt?
There's no mineral assay on this or contaminant assay, which Celtic sea salt does regularly, at least annually. So I can't, maybe biannually. And so I can go on their website or download their PDF, and the Celtic salt will say there's this much percentage of lithium and barium and nickel and gold and silver even. And it'll always start sodium at the top, then chloride, then magnesium. Next one after that. Maybe you'll see potassium or calcium, it kind of varies. And you'll see trace amounts of every mineral. So there's 85 trace elements in this. And that's why the Aqueon is such a great product as an electrolyzer, because when you don't get some of the trace elements in parts per billion or parts per million, then think about electricity moves better in a mineral rich wire, right? So if you have a mineral deficient body, the electrical signals aren't going to move around as smoothly in the body. Doesn't that make sense? I got wind of this like 30 years ago. I was like, oh my God, I better make sure I'm well mineralized. Because if I'm not, the body takes toxins from the environment. Like if you don't have enough zinc in your body, the body will take cadmium out of the air and replace what needs to be done with zinc with cadmium because it's close enough.
Wow.
When there's not enough good calcium getting in the body, and we're doing the wrong kind of bone broth from bad animals, we're going to get lead in our bones. Or the potters, some of the glazes had lead in it.
Mhm.
So how do you know that when you're looking at pottery? If you're just looking at stuff, can you tell?
Well, I always steer away from pottery from China. 'Cause
The made in China pottery.
almost 100% of those glazes have lead in them.
So this is a really important health tip, folks, is that if you're using pottery, like you're making your tea in your clay pot or whatnot, your glaze, you could be getting a dose of lead every time you use that. And I guess there's no, made in China is one signal, like Jay says, and the pros probably know, how to look at it or smell it or some way.
What about arsenic? Is that in any of it?
That's a rice issue. The Lundberg people had a big problem in Northern California because it was discovered in the non-organic rice, and a lot of the non-organic rices in California especially, they were showing up high in arsenic. And so they were actually saying that the white rice version was better than the brown rice version.
Well, it was in the hulls though, so.
Right, so you de-hull it and then you just get the starch and
Right.
there's less contamination. Unfortunately, and a lot of us have never tasted freshly hulled rice. Has anybody ever had like rice in the big outer hull of rice is undigestible. That's why they have those rice hull things, you see them everywhere now, those tubes. Those are rice hulls, they're indestructible.
Wow.
They're gnarly. That's why they use them like hay.
Oh, really?
So when I was at the Kikuchi Institute in 1995, 96, they had a rice holding machine. I mean, it was 3 feet wide, 4 feet tall, 2 feet back. This thing was a beast. And they would order 50-pound bags of unhulled rice from the Trinity Alps, no less. So they'd send the rice from California all the way back east. I gotta figure out who that was. I was buying it wholesale for a while, but I'd lost track of it 10, 20 years ago. There was a new guy at the Wednesday Farmers Market. He was selling a high quality medium grain rose rice. I don't know if he's still around, but him and I talked and they haul it fresh. That's why I started buying it.
Well, he was Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Japanese family.
Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah, he
About
speaks
speaks
challenges, yeah.
There's some real rice snobs out there because like in Japan, they have tofu fresh every day. And they come over here and they have this like 5-day-old shit in a plastic container, and they just have the look of disgust on their face, like, how could you eat this garbage? They would say, like, teachers like this. So they hold the rice, and they hold the rice, and then they made a big, huge pot for 80 people of this rice. I remember my first bite, I only had to chew it like 5 or 10 times, and it was already sweet. It was short grain rice, which is generally sweeter than long grain.
Mhm.
So if you're overweight and you want to eat rice, you choose long grain basmati.
Mhm.
If you're underweight, you choose short grain rice because it's short and fat. You see the metaphor? But technically there's less sugar in a long grain rice, is why. And if you really want to lose weight and eat rice, then you do the wild rice. And that's not even truly a rice, because that grows in the marshes in Minnesota and stuff. It's a seed.
Yeah.
But they mix well too, right? That brown japonica rice, that it was packages of it with the black rice and the long grain. Oh, that's a great combo. Beautiful presentation. All right, so yeah, arsenic was with the rice. So to finish that off, and I forget what arsenic replaces in the body though. So like zinc is cadmium, and then there's some really horrendous ones. Like if you get the wrong chromium supplement, I guess chromium is in car bumpers too.
Yeah, chrome.
Chrome, right? That makes sense, right? So one of my teachers used to say there was one form of chromium they were saying. I don't think it was picolinate, but there was one form of chromium. He goes, well, we'll just say picolinate just to pick on it, but I'm not sure this is the way it was. But he goes, so that's picolinic acid bound to chromium. You have a positive ion and a negative ion, and they're attracted to each other. It's like man and woman. Man's we'll call man the negative ion and the woman the positive ion. How's that?
Okay. I'm sure the women will love that.
We're surrounded, I think, tonight. Are we outnumbered? We have 5 men tonight. No, 4 men, 3, 5 men, and
You're right.
5 women. We're not outnumbered. Hey, a health gathering with an equal.
You're not counting Sophie and Daisy though.
Yeah,
Oh, we're outnumbered again. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so they're attracted. It's one way to look at chemistry is that why you have calcium lactate. Lactic acid has a negative charge, calcium has a positive charge, so they want to come together in a relationship. That's the way it works. So you have look at the modern world. You have all these sappy love songs, rock and roll songs going around for generations now, right? And what was when I used to pick on as a teenager? I was into punk rock and I hated popular music because of this. It was, oh baby, you complete me. I'm only half finished as a man. But you know, some version of that song. You're my other half. I found you. You complete me. I think you're supposed to complete yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Unless you find somebody like Noel.
We had a full twin flame around that, yeah.
You know?
And we didn't know until we were out of it. About a year after we split up, we sat down and we both asked each other, "You think we were codependent?" And we both thought, yeah. But that's how life works. Is the positive, the yin and the yang, they come together in a dance. And so ideally, it's a conscious dance, right? Not an unconscious dance. So we got the salt one. How about we try a bitter? This is not going to be pleasant. So let's try a potassium bitter. Probably better than some water, but I'll tell you what. Let's just do it. We'll break open this capsule and I'll try it first and see how disgusting it is. So this is called PTM. It's a potassium-based supplement from Systemic Formulas, and it's a very fascinating formula. We do a couple of different forms of potassium that they call in the supplement world a ligand, L-A-G-A-N-D. Do you know the definition of a ligand?
Lion or Lily?
L-A-G-A-N-D, in this context at least.
Okay.
So like magnesium citrate is a ligand form. Magnesium that's in chlorophyll is not a ligand form because it's natural. Magnesium in the standard process product Easy Mag is a natural magnesium from Swiss chard and buckwheat leaf juice.
What's mine? Calcium what?
That's a natural form of magnesium that's not ligand bound. So when they say ligand, it should be a red flag. They're making it in a lab. The standard process does it too. Their ligand bound one is magnesium lactate. Why do you think? These are natural people, family owned. They ferment beets to make lactic acid. They collect that lactic acid from the natural beet fermentation and they bind that to the magnesium and the calcium. Because that form, calcium lactate and magnesium lactate, the form that the body uses of these is the bicarbonate form. So it only takes one enzymatic step to make lactate into bicarbonate, which is the usable form. The body can't use the lactate form. So if you buy calcium carbonate, guess how many steps it takes to convert that to calcium bicarbonate? 15 to 20 steps. That's a lot of mitochondrial chi and energy being used up. That's why the RDA for calcium is so high, because they know that you're gonna slow down your thyroid, get constipation, and what's the other one? And thicken your blood by taking that form of calcium. When I read about this 15 years ago, because I wasn't selling supplements until 15 years ago, I didn't believe in them. But then Standard Process kept getting, you gotta check out Standard Process, you gotta check out Standard Process. Freaking parrot in my ear for 5, 6, 7 people. The same thing with Nourishing Traditions in the Western Price a few years before that. It's like, wow, supplements, raw whole food concentrates. They're doing it how? So they have a vacuum chamber bigger than this house with walls, glass walls that are thicker than I can, So I had to go visit to see, and they're dehydrating their organ meats and their superfoods in a vacuum at 71 degrees Fahrenheit. That was intriguing. Like they went to that much trouble to make there's only 2 facilities like this in the entire world. There's a Dutch whey company that does their whey in a vacuum and Standard Process. That's how expensive it is to make a facility like this. I had to see it for myself. So I got flown back east 12 years ago and I was on board like immediately, like family-owned company. The guy hated the FDA. Their mission is to sort of, subvert at the minimum the pharmaceutical industry. And that's not an official position. If you're watching this video, that's Craig's opinion. Because they were closed down twice in the 40s and the 60s, because Royal Lee would talk in front of conferences of doctors and talk about the problem with medicine. And so they didn't like that, did they?
No.
He was a true hero. Royal Lee, rest in peace. Your mission continues through us. The bitter pill, right? So, they have, the new salt, new salt. That's potassium chloride. It's synthetic potassium chloride. So is that any better than fake salt, you think? It's just fake potassium. And potassium by some people is called the radioactive element. Do you want a lot of fake synthetic radioactive element in your body? I know. It's yin, and they're pairing sodium and potassium are an antagonistic couple. So sodium is the yang part of that couple, and potassium is the yin, and radiation is yin. That's not bad. Actually, that's not too bad. You did a good job not making it too bad. And then the gel cap with this company is basically just plant cellulose. So they have an impressive cap. The cheap supplement companies, you'll see magnesium stearate or calcium stearate on the label. And that means just stearic acid bound to magnesium. It's a fatty acid that comes from beef fat or vegetable fat. It's a common fatty acid, really. So, but they give you a stale version of it, is my point. You don't want rancid, stale fats, right? Because they're on their way to plastics. Remember the conversation last week? Have you ever watched this video, folks? If you're a first timer, this is why cancer is so important, because your cell membranes, as Carl said last week, they need to be fluid to open and let things in and open and let waste out, right? You want to have, like, don't you want your sphincters in your body all working well?
Yeah.
I think your anal sphincter didn't work well.
Right.
It's too open or too closed. Unless it's pouring out one end and not coming out for hours and days on the other. That's not good. So you want to make sure. So what is the you gotta, yeah, like the look on Kent's face is worth it
I know.
over there. Yeah, it was worth
Don't
it.
even have to taste it.
What is in this?
Potassium, a lot of different forms of potassium.
Potassium.
Is that healthy to eat like that?
This form, yes, because they've gone to the trouble to make it into a food form. And there's some food forms in here, and there's even seaweed and other pretty cool stuff. That's like 3-point font. I mean, I got reading glasses on, I can't even see it.
So I told the child to, I need to get some younger friends so they can read.
Are you
about it.
selling that?
Yeah, I could sell it.
But you don't have kids over Katie.
Yeah.
I don't go out of my way to carry it because it's literally that.
Well, if I can't see.
It's a specialty product.
What do you do with that?
What's this thing?
So, people that, like my buddy just went up, actually today I gave body work and they had the fireplace on the whole time, like a gas fireplace. And I was standing literally 3 feet away from a fireplace doing body work today. And I had sweat pouring out of me because I'm, running energy too. And I watched these. It was the girl who's now in the Navy and she's 20 years old. She's doing experimental aircraft and stuff. I mean, they're putting her through some brutal stuff. So it's a pleasure to see her, because I've known her since she's like 6 years old. And so I'm running energy in this house. These are psychic people. And there was a lot of energy running in this house today. Like when I walked in, none of us hugged. We all looked at each other and I felt like they were this far away, like from me to Kent, but it felt like they were a million miles away. I never really felt this way when I walked in, and they must have seen something with me, because we were all like, oh, no hugs. And then I worked on a pouring sweat. So that's when you would use something like that. When you're pouring sweat is when you would use the potassium. But ideally you get it from vegetables. You do a veggie juice would be a better form of potassium. But if you don't, the point of these products is if you can't get to food fast enough, that's why I sell what I do. Like you got all those SP green foods and cod liver oils, right? And the food stuff. Well, that's as good as it's going to get in a dried form, what you have. So that's why I have this. This is as good as it's going to get if you don't have the ability to do a juice after you've done some sweating. So that's why you would have this. So if you have potassium deficiency signs, then you would take this product. Like potassium comes from fruits and vegetables. And sodium comes from all the other. So think high calorie foods, those are more sodium rich, and think low calorie foods like fruits and vegetables, those are potassium rich. So in the summertime, what do we want? More high calorie or low calorie foods? We want the low calorie foods because there's a lot of sunlight hitting us. And that's one of the, I have a slide up, I won't show it tonight, but I found the chemistry chart of the chloroplast, the cell in the plant that makes sugar out of sunlight, called the Calvin cycle. So I gotta look up the Calvin cycle and understand, like, how is this plant taking sunlight and making sugar out of it? I can see the diagrams and the symbols, but I gotta like, I mean, to me, like, you gotta be half dead to not be in awe of the fact that the plant is taking sunlight and making its blood out of sunlight. Doesn't that awestruck you?
Yeah, I mean, they transmute. I mean, like chickens, they don't eat that much calcium.
No.
You know, but they produce a
Silica.
lot of calcium in their eggs.
They transmute silica
Yeah.
in the green grasses into calcium. Louis Curon proved it in his book, Biological Transmutations. They would actually measure the amount of calcium going into those chickens and the amount of silica, and they would measure the amount of calcium coming out of the eggs. And it was astounding how much more calcium was coming out than the intake. They proved it, and they're like, how are they doing that? The bacteria in the chicken gut is transmuting the silica to calcium. It's eating silica and shitting out calcium.
Wow.
Now that isn't a miracle of life, folks, and magical. I don't know what is. Like, I mean, just shoot me now. If I was numb to this stuff, that's why I'm up here with so much passion, because it's like, this is amazing. It's making life out of photons, right?
Yeah.
Because animals eat those greens, and then we eat the animals, right? Or bugs eat the plants, and then we, well, some people eat the bugs. Anybody have any good bug stories? Any bug story?
I ate lots of bugs, all the bugs in Thailand.
What was the best one? Cricket?
You know, I liked silkworm.
Raw?
Yeah. Crickets are nice. Crickets are deep fried crickets are great.
Anything you guys.
Okay, so John T just said silkworm raw. Is there any sauce or just straight up?
Well, we were watching the silk being made, and they said, "Oh, try this," you know, so we did it.
Just chomp away and chew it up and swallow. What it tastes like?
Tastes like maggots. Hey, I heard of a good way to feed chickens if you've got no food, you know. So what you do, you sacrifice a chicken, you take the guts out of it, which you don't eat anyway, and you put it on like a sieve, like a big sieve with big holes in it, and then the maggots get, you know, the flies come, they lay the eggs, so there's maggots all over it. And then the maggots fall off through the sieve onto the floor, and then the chickens come and eat.
Oh,
maggots.
brilliant.
Cool.
In fact, the chickens love the maggots so much. I've heard that people get gophers and they string them up. And that the chickens actually stand under the gophers with the maggots coming up, with their mouths open.
That's quite a visual. There's a hungry ghost, right?
Oh, man.
It's just coming in. Very descriptive, Junkie. I think the audio is good. I don't have to repeat that. That was like, wow.
You can see they really like those maggots.
I had a buddy out in Davis where I got my chocolate tonic strain. He was taking all of his compost and putting it in this, it was a grub bin. And I'd never seen a grub bin before. So the grubs would just eat the composted food, right? And he lifted off this layer and he grabbed a grub, and then, I mean, the chickens had already been fed, but they were trying to murder each other to get this grub first. You know, the alpha chicken always got the, you know, and the other ones are like, move aside for the alpha, because, you know, man, they are brutal to each other, right?
Yeah.
That's where pecking order comes in.
Pecking order, that's right. The strongest pecker wins.
Right.
Oh my goodness, there's another pun. The strongest pecker wins. Wow.
Literally. Literally. Male or female.
Oh man, the digressions are just wonderful. So that wasn't that bitter, was it?
No.
It wasn't that bitter. Okay, now we'll pass around watercress.
And what is this good for?
This is a superfood beyond other superfoods. Like watercress, I'm growing it because it's free. After the rain, you can drive up to Wilder, and it's growing right out the freeway. You just walk up the embankment where you see the water coming out up the mountain there. You can dig up a little patch and you can do what I did. And now I got a huge area of it that I dug out of the last house, which I won't formally curse the previous owner, but Bernie went by the house and the backyard is destroyed. Everything that I did is gone. Everything that went on there for an entire year, all the consciousness and the spirits and the birds and the new insects, Gandhi. But this is the story of my life. I permacultured out. I started studying permaculture in the early 90s. So here we are, 25 years later. I would say I probably had 15 projects the last 25 years that have been destroyed like this. Just out of ignorance. I wrote him a big long letter when I left, trying to get some closure, like, hey, please, there's new life there. You've got golden berries and raspberries and blackberries and sorry, your fig tree got eaten by the gophers, but you didn't put the wire down good enough, you know, but you still got apricots and you got a hospital, any medicine you need. Like I left him any medicine he could have needed for anything. And I told him that. I said, here's the outline, here's roughly where the plants are. I go, if you want to pay me to tell you what everything is, you can put up signs, but I'm not going to do it for free. I've already made, you know, $50,000 of value in your backyard.
And your idea is they were just cleaning up the yard, right?
So I ran into it. That's why we're not on this property. Like we're up in the Gilroy Mountains. It's the same idea. Now I'm not cursing Julian because I love Julian. We've been friends for 30 years, and he just has a different value system. And what I learned through my men's work is that different values. I can't project what I value onto another and say they should value that. Right.
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 I deeply value plants. Other people don't.
Mhm.
Well, and he's gonna, your past landlord is gonna be renting it or he's moving in.
We don't know. We don't know because he's not been communicating. There was no closure with moving out of there, including our deposits. It's another like semi-curse, but trying to forgive and move on. You know, we all agreed, me and Bernie and Gene, said, let's just move on. We don't want to put the effort into noticing him and doing a lot of baloney because he has friends tied to our community, and you know, I don't want to cause a big, just whatever. You know, there's a few broken fixtures, and we put the Ethernet. We didn't ask for permission for the Ethernet, so there's holes in the wall for the Ethernet quote. You know, so it's like, hey, you know, it's a wash. In the end, you know, it's like here, chicken in here. It's like, let's move on. We don't need to spend any energy on this. You know, like how are we spending our chi? You know,
Yeah.
in today's world, especially because it's Anybody got a 100% ease in their life right now? 100% ease, like everything's easy.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, no way, man.
Yeah,
You're in the middle of a war. How
Yeah.
can it be easy?
You have to be a.
so we have to create our own
Yeah,
ease,
sleep,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
We have to create our own ease, which is through boundaries. They're called boundaries, right?
wow, yes.
So back to that, that's the situation that we're in as a world, not as a world, because I'm talking to my buddy, over in Africa, and he says he can walk 10 minutes to the beach in the Gambia where he is, and he wants to walk through the bush. No roads, no trails, just walking through the bush to the beach. I'm like, wow, that's cool. But the people that live out in nature understand nature. If you live in the city with straight lines and squares everywhere, you don't understand nature anymore.
Right.
Because your limbic system is around things that are foreign. I mean, this isn't really natural in some way. Like we lived in a dome home for a while. It wasn't a Bucky dome, but it was a dome home. And I have some friends, the ones who had the wedding on the June solstice eclipse 2000,
Wow.
they were in a Bucky dome. They had the classic triangles, and it was like 25-foot diameter and probably 15-foot ceiling, and they had a wood burning stove in it, and it was up in Laytonville, northern Mendo County, where the Women's Herbal Symposium is, Laytonville, and where they used to have a
Wavy Gravy's place, need Wavy Gravy.
Wavy Gravy?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? Yeah, Wavy Gravy was there in Laytonville. So they're north of Laytonville, and then literally a half-hour drive off the grid towards the coast on this fire road.
So how did it feel being in the dome?
Really natural. It heated up nicely. Slept like a baby. Obviously, there's no EMFs up there still. They have only I think they just have Ethernet. No, did the watercress go around?
No.
No, you ate it all. You didn't.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, here it is. Jesus. Oh, here's another one. You want more? That's another bitter. And then there's another one behind that.
Is this yours?
There's one more bitter. So this is greater celandine. Greater celandine. This plant, when I picked this right here, you see it's got dark right here, you'll see that on there. This plant bleeds yellow-orange blood. If you break the stem, it won't do it now because it's, I already did it. Yeah. So its lifeblood is orange yellow. So you could use it to dissolve warts. You can use it. The plant was discovered by a guy watching a swallow pecking at the celandine leaf and then spitting the juice into the baby's eyes
Wow.
when the babies were coming out. So it's acrid and dissolving. So there's some slimy layer over the baby bird's eyes, and the bird knows to peck this. This is a gallstone dissolver.
Wow.
This dissolves gallstones.
So.
So the bright yellow orange liquid, that's berberine. High berberine plant. You hear about berberine and golden seal and berberine, blah, blah, blah. Everyone, brags about berberine, but berberine is part of a plant process. You have the whole process. So the other part of this story is that it's a very invasive weed, and it's bitter, but it's also acrid. So it's a interesting flavor. Maybe wants to try it.
Say what it is again.
Greater celandine. Celandine. Latin name is really cool. Chelodium. I guess chelodium is related to the Latin name for swallow.
What's the name of this?
Celandine.
Oh, that's what you're saying, okay.
And chelodium is the Latin name. Chelodium majus for major celandine.
And what
Greater.
does it do, Craig? This,
So is the homeopathic chelodium from that?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Chelodium or chelodium.
Okay,
Maybe it's chelodium in homeopathy.
yeah.
So that I got a little bite of the leaf, and it's not. The stem is way more acrid. And this is the kind of plant where there was a French Maurice. I asked you guys this question last year. How do you say this in French? Messe. Messe. Gue. French.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's.
Messique?
Mm.
Messique. I'm not, I like trying to put, so Maurice Messique or Messique was his name. And I was staying in I think I told this story. I was staying in a VRBO. It was before Airbnb got popular. And I'm in this bed, and then the whole wall when I wake up to is these books. And I wake up in the morning, and this book out of 400 books on this bookshelf, this one was screaming at me by this herbalist. Maurice.
Jump out.
It could have, it was called Of Men and Plants, was the name of the book, Of Men and Plants. And I was like, all right, I just literally, I went and got a cup of coffee and sat down and read all morning. I was intrigued. And this plant, he kept talking about this plant. And he was alive during the 1930s when Winston Churchill and the French aristocracy, it was really big. And he was arrested multiple times for practicing medicine without a license. And he said, the aristocracy was so snobbish, they wouldn't drink the celandine tea. So he would get results with doing hand baths and foot baths with it. So if somebody won't take a bad tasting herbs orally, like, kids, you could usually get them to bathe in it. And that it works. He was getting just as good results with arthritis and joint pain because that's connected to liver and gallbladder malfunction. So this plant dredges out the bile. Everybody get a little bit of spice.
Oh, God, yeah.
It really comes on later. So it's a bitter and a spice.
It's overwhelming.
Okay, this is Yarrow. This is bitter and sour and spicy. You want to try it? Yarrow.
Can you taste it?
I think they're shot now.
That celandine was so.
Yeah, you should have given us a celandine last.
Mhm.
One of those, what's that thing with
The Yarrow is very gentle, actually. It's new growth. So the Yarrow plant, the plants that I see now did not exist a month ago. Like the Yarrow is about this tall now. The Comfrey, some of them are this tall, and the gynostemas now are, well, there was nothing before. One of them, this chair I'm in, the gynostema is as big as this chair. In a month and a half ago, there was nothing. And so we're talking about the magic of plants, and the flavors they produce is a signal as to their properties. And how do you think the Chinese medical guys, when I first started learning Chinese medicine, like, how did they know that this herb or food went to the heart, small intestine, and pancreas meridians? It'd be easy to identify the flavors, but how the hell did they figure that out, right? And I realized,
Well, probably all the bitter plants went to the heart and to the liver.
I think they were meditating on it.
Right.
I think they would fast
They were.
and then take the herb and then just meditate on what it was doing and go, and then they would sit together after 100 people tried it and put their heads together and go, I got this, this, and this, what did you get?
Right,
And someone was collecting all that data, I bet.
Right.
exactly.
And what do you think?
I think that's right.
Well, yeah, they sent, 5000 BC, one of the Chinese emperors sent emissaries around all over China. And they categorized what herbs they used, when to pick it, when to plant it, what special preparations to make for pregnant women and things like that. And, the dose.
5,000 BC?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so they did that, and then they spent like the next couple of thousand years amalgamating all that information. It was all written down in books, and then they tried to make it into a materia medica,
So if you're watching this or listening to this, folks, what Jonty was talking about is, you think that's 5,000 BC was 7,000 years ago.
Maybe it was 5,000 years ago, not 5,000 BC.
Well, nevertheless, we're talking a couple of thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
That we arrogantly think that we are the apex of evolution.
Right.
We do, don't we? And it's like,
I don't think so.
no, we're more like the the meme of the ape turning into the human. We're like the human turning back into the ape. We turn into a lot of, not we, but a lot of people turn back into Homer Simpson. Right?
They still can't build the pyramids.
Rebooting.
Yeah, and having studied orgonite, there was some theories amongst the orgonite people, that's what was covering the pyramids, was a layer some inches or feet thick of orgonite.
Huh.
Because that's the piezoelectric effect, and they already had these on the ley lines on the earth, and you cover these with these this piezoelectric effect, these minerals and this whatever they're using to hold it all together, then you're generating a gigantic torus field around these pyramids. I mean, probably went out for miles, the torus fields. And maybe the torus field were acting as portals for ships to come in and time travel. And so it was coming out. There's some really interesting, Kamala Harris had, I watched these memes, and there was one of her poking fun at her, like, it's time to leave Earth. This guy, John Talks on YouTube. And hey, John Talks, I'm plugging you. I love your work. So he does these collections of the idiocy. And this latest one of Kamala was, she kept talking about how space is exciting. And they started off the whole meme with a 5-year-old could have written this speech. And that's what she looked like. Space is exciting. And I'm like, oh, there's the disclosure coming. See, they're getting us ready for their Project Bluebeam thing. Did you see those clouds the other day? There was like 3 dome-shaped clouds above the mountains yesterday, the day before. Oh, Gene's asleep, but we were texting back and forth about it. They look like flying saucers. It's like, is there a ship inside? It was it would have been this side of your house, Carol. It was in the afternoon or the evening of the day, yesterday, the day before. And they texted me like, those clouds look weird. And I'm usually the one identifying that. I looked over there, I was like, oh, wow. And I've only seen them up towards Shasta. They always see the weird clouds around Shasta, like weird looking spaceship clouds around. It's like, is that really a cloud? Yeah. Anybody get another hit on the Yarrow? Back to that. So the Yarrow is such a powerful plant that one of my teachers, Christopher Hobbs, we were all, when I was learning all this 25 years ago, we had him question and answer period, and he was playing guitar one night, like a camping trip, and I was like, wow, what a gift. And this is Christopher Hobbs play guitar. And we asked him, he said, Christopher, if you only could grow one plant, what would it be? Like if one plant was your plant for everything and everything, and without hesitation, he said Yarrow. That's an impressive statement to say about a plant for a man that had been studying at that point as long as I have now, over 30 years. I was like, wow, Yarrow. And he told it because he can use the root for one thing, the stem for another, the leaves for another, the flower for another. If you dry it, it gets one effect. If you do it fresh, it's another effect. If you pickle it in alcohol, there's one effect, and vinegar another effect, and salt another effect. And the old Chinese thought so much of the I Ching. They would toss with the special, the twigs of the Yarrow were the I Ching toss. Like, because they're so square.
Right.
And it wouldn't be mine. So one of Hobbs's quick stories of Yarrow was he said he was up and he had some high elevation Yarrow. He's up in the Sierras about 6,000 feet, and he picked it and made tea one night because he wanted to try one of the local plants. And he said he had auditory hallucinations all night.
Wow.
He said it was like divine music and angels and sirens and beings. And I was like, sign me up. I'm gonna try that shit. Yeah.
So your plant choice would be Comfrey?
Mine would be Comfrey, and because Yarrow isn't building new tissue per se. And in today's world, 20 plus years later, when I get my Comfrey juice in, like I got some today, and yeah, where's the rest of that green juice?
It's right there.
By the footstool.
There's today's green juice with a high amount of Comfrey in it. Some leaves that didn't exist 3 days ago. So Comfrey has that growth factor, and it's slimy, and you can use Comfrey for, quote, any condition involving blood. So they're coughing up blood, you can give it to them in a tea, put packs on the chest. If they're pooping blood, you can do enemas with it or take it orally. If bloody nose, you could theoretically, what would I do if I had a bloody
That's
nose?
what they call a knit bone.
Right.
Yeah.
The natives, it wasn't native to this continent, but it was brought over. I believe most of the Comfrey that I've read about came from Russia, probably from the Ukraine. Oh, one little bit of data that I got, it's really fascinating, is that one real news source noted that on the Polish-Ukraine border, there's more people going back into Ukraine now than are leaving.
Yeah, well, that's even on mainstream.
Oh, mainstream's even covering that. Great. Good.
They're trying to go back home.
Yeah, people are going back home now. It's like, you know. But there are news sources also saying that, you know, still bad fighting going on.
Oh, yeah, no, the places are still trying to capture and stuff, it's bad scene.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of what the food scene thing has been. So, you know, if you're watching this video, then we're looking at, you know, this Yarrow plant and talking about Comfrey. And the reason why I'm growing Yarrow and Comfrey is for, you might ask yourself, so Craig's been doing this 30 years. Why would he choose to grow the plants he's growing? Well, one reason is because each plant has at least 20 uses. That's one of my first qualifications. It has to be a multitasker. Like rosemary has like 30 uses you use it for. Yarrow is at least 30, Comfrey, blah, blah, blah. And second parameter is easy to grow. I'm a lazy man gardener, you know, like, so it's got to be easy to grow.
Something you have to move it around the county.
Don't even get me started on that.
That's not
You
lazy
guys-
work.
So I'm gonna bless,
She's a witch tonight, isn't she?
I'm gonna bless my old friend Hunter Francis. He met me in San Luis Obispo when I started this whole dance 25, 30 years ago, this guy. He single-handedly formed at the School of Agriculture at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He single-handedly formed the permaculture school by getting grants and funds. And Hunter, you are a saint. So hundreds of people went through this alternative school of agriculture because of Hunter. And he's on my natural law calls right now. He's out in Texas. And so Hunter, I get to see the reflection of like, because he looks at me, I go, Hunter, remember when I started all this? So I said, some of those plants that I started then, I'm still carrying around 25 years later.
I'm not surprised.
And people talk about devotion, right? And hey, that's devotion. Because they're my babies. They're my children. Because they talk to me. I can't escape them. If I killed them, the karmic repercussions to me, I mean, I'd have like the plantain deity, the Yarrow deity. How dare you? Because it's a knowing sin. Like the worst sin is to sin knowingly, right? That's why, what is it, 1st and 3rd degree murder? It's a way worse sins than if you plan the murder than if you just, you know, kill someone out of passion.
What do you pick them to eat them?
Pardon?
You pick them to eat them.
Pick them to
The
eat them.
Comfrey.
Well, now that's the reason why I'm talking about plants, and my slogan that will be on the web ad infinitum, ad nauseum soon, is bringing plants to people and people to plants, because we have the same blood. And if you're not in awe hearing that chlorophyll and hemoglobin are identical except for iron and magnesium, then you might consider that you're numb and half dead. I'm challenging you out there watching this, like, you should be in awe. I only should a few times a year, and that's one of my shoulds is, oh my God, I get like just lit up inside. Like when I first heard that 30 years ago, chlorophyll, why aren't we talking about that more? That's incredible. And plants are making sugar out of sunlight, which gets turned into vitamin C. That's gone in 24 hours. Therefore, the human population in this country is vitamin C deficient. Thinking that synthetic crap isn't going to solve anything. I've seen it over and over again. We were talking, okay, back to Yarrow, sorry. So we're looking at the plants then, well, specifically Yarrow and Comfrey. You know, we're looking at different properties. They facilitate different actions in the body. So if you have a mango, it's a different action if you have Comfrey, obviously. So you would feel different eating a mango than you would eating Comfrey, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
You would think. So when I have an empirical evidence-based thing with these green juices. When we moved, right, the plants, it was winter, and so I didn't have green juices for 2 months. Energy levels, generally when I don't get these in fall, 30 to 60%. Devastatingly lower energy when I don't get these in.
So both times you did it in the winter.
And I had a devastatingly low energy for a few months and depression. And then to the first one of these I made, it was like somebody went, and I felt like that much bigger.
Mm.
Wow. Oh my God. So there's something about what they're doing that cannot be measured, except we feel it. And if you do this long enough, you get sensitive enough, and it's like, oh yeah, I can't. Yeah, here's a plug for cleansing. So I like to tell people, once your cells get a taste of the good life, your cells of a higher energy state, they don't want to go back to a lower energy state, and they will rebel. Like when I was doing my cleansing thing and my anti-candida diet for a number of years, I mean, it took me years because I kept going back. And every time I went back, it was this horrendously horrible reaction. A few times I had an allergy attack so bad I'd sneeze 30 times, boiler water pouring out my nose, and it's like, yeah, that bag of cherries probably shouldn't have done that. I was on a fruit fast for a year. I went a year without fruit. Mostly, you know, a few, like I said, a few screw ups. So, because I suspected as a teenager, I would drink a Coke and then be all jittery and feel weird afterwards and be like, that Coke just affected my consciousness. Did anybody else think that way when they were younger? Like how food might affect their mind? And
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, if you're watching this video, you got to be, you have to at least be partially empathic because, you know, I was telling this new client, we had talked for an hour and I go, oh, can you understand why now I'm not for everyone? Like, yeah, I can see why. I'm not for everybody, right?
Well, yeah.
Like Jonty's like, why would you podcast this? You know, like I'd be done in 3 minutes, you know, and I love feedback like that because it tells me where I'm weak, you know.
Is that what you said, John?
Well, you know,
No, it's great feedback.
The
It's great
beginning
input.
of the podcast is really important. You
Yeah.
have to set up the situation. You have to tell people what you're talking about. You have to draw them in. But it was just complete
Chaos.
confusion. Nothing was going on, and it was like,
Yeah.
you know, it was just, you know.
So the next level will be, that's why the next level will be, no, I love that. So the next level will be, I have to have a film studio, even if it's just a blank wall in my bedroom. And he says, that's where you'll have a blank wall behind you, and then you'll do an intro video for 3 minutes to introduce the talk, and then we edit out. Because the editor on this computer is easy. It's just like click, end here, start here, and I just, you know, I crop off that first 3 or 4 minutes of chaos
Oh, okay.
and start it right when the juicy stuff starts.
Okay.
And have a 3-minute intro or maybe a 15-second intro, you know, and lay the groundwork because that feedback now just gave me that aha because we were going to do that anyway.
Okay.
Eventually.
Well, because Shahid said, you know, you got to have, sometimes you have to do an audio over. Like he said, for your natural law stuff isn't going to sell in the format you're doing it because it's too chaotic.
Right.
So he made a professional PowerPoint, unlike mine, and he said, now we'll have you do an audio over, and then some of that footage from the classes, we'll add that in little, you know, 5-10 second segments.
Right.
Like your guys' testimonials are awesome, but he doesn't like the audio.
Yeah, because it wasn't set up for it really.
You know, it's a Zoom camera, you know, and I told him, I go, people aren't watching that for audio perfection. They're going to watch it for, you know, for 30 seconds just to see if it's true, you know. Is this guy trustable with this $500 program I'm buying called Natural Law? So the eventuality of it is all these classes I'm teaching are going to go on Thinkific as an online teaching platform, and it'll all be like lesson 1, click here, and then, you know, be introduced properly. And, you know, we're a year away from that, but, you know, at least, but we're heading in the right direction because, you know, everything's there, and I'm a content producer. Like I have to write now, like, because there's stuff going on about Steiner, and I get thrown this Steiner stuff, and iron is part of free will, he says. And this living water thing, the guy who wrote the Iron Post is part of the Living Water movie, and I didn't know that. And so I've got like 5 Steiner articles paired with these elements I'm teaching in the nutrition, the personal alchemy right now. We're talking about the elements with having personalities. And how does that relate to pH and the yin yang thing? And, you know, what is health? And So we're repeating the first 5 or 6 classes over and over again. We're kind of stuck on these first out of 20 because we're building it now. This is the prototype. And I got 7 brilliant minds on the call with me and here too, where we, like, hey, that doesn't work. And then we bring it back to the lab and make it better. And so that's where, like we'll edit this part out. If I have somebody doing this, sip, and then this part just leaves and it doesn't even make the final cut.
Can I ask a question that kind
Yes.
of brings us back to someplace where you kind of left off?
Good.
You were gonna say Comfrey, if you had nosebleeds, what would you do with Comfrey? And you never got to it.
I know, I was trying to imagine if I would nick a tea and snort it.
Or
Well,
compress.
would you, if you had regular nosebleeds, should you just ingest Comfrey regularly?
You never probably solve it. But there's also Royal Lee would always recommend Cyruta Plus for nosebleeds, and that's a high bioflavonoid product and slightly sour. So I believe that the vitamin C complex is also needed. You would do Comfrey with something high bioflavonoid, like berries, if you didn't have Cyruta Plus.
So Dr. Eisenberg recommends grapeseed extract.
Right, that's not necessarily high bioflavonoid, but that's got a anti-inflammatory, antioxidant action. So it may have, because vitamin C is also an antioxidant, right?
Okay.
So people, there's a membrane, when I learned about allergies and, there's so many mysteries. There's this membrane behind the nose here that you ever had water dripping out of your nose?
Yes, once in a while.
So one teacher says that that's brain heat and it's brain sweat. That's your brain sweating in a hyperkundalini state. Isn't that fascinating? Hyperkundalini, so an exceedingly fiery awakening, because it rises, right, they say. And I've tracked mine up my body over the last 30 years. I can definitely say that when I started getting headaches for years, I couldn't figure out why. And I've been doing semen retention work for 30 years. It all made sense. It's like, dude, you got to move that sexual energy around more. It's just getting stuck right here. And that was from a book. So back to Comfrey.
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
Have you tried Cyruta for your nosebleeds?
No.
It's brilliant.
Because you can get Cyruta, a standard processed thing, and just eat it, and it
Okay.
keeps the cell membranes tighter.
So does it work in the sinus area? Because I think the nosebleeds actually come from my sinus area.
So the product is so cheap that it's worth even just an experiment just to see if that works.
So that's a product that standard process has.
Yeah, and you could also, the Comfrey, I've got a lot of Comfrey. You could take you could just cut off a little chunk of the Comfrey and plant it for you, and the leaves will come up almost immediately. And you would mash the leaves or even puree them in the water, and you could do a pack of the Comfrey leaves right up in here.
Okay.
You could pack them like a face pack, and I've seen really good results with face packs. Like, you guys ever heard of lotus root?
Yeah.
So the macrobiotic people, when I started my career, when I was 30 years old, I was back there at this institute, and this guy had come in and he had been recommended lotus root was in season, so they had fresh lotus root and they grated it really fine. It makes a little wheat powder with it and a little grated ginger. And he said, go put that lotus root pack on your head tonight and come back and do it every night this week and then come back the end of the week and let's talk. So I got the fortune to go to the follow-up, and the lady said she'd had this lotus root pack on, around here. And she said she washed it off in the morning, and then she said, quote, there was purple, green, and brown mucus coming out my nose and mouth like you couldn't believe.
Wow.
So it was drawing all the mucus towards the cavities because lotus is drawing. You might go do the same thing with potatoes. They use potatoes sometimes to draw stuff. Like they do a potato sort of a rectum thing. What do they call those things you put in the rectum?
Suppository.
Suppository. Yeah, they do a potato suppository,
Yeah.
which sounds really weird, but I guess it helps with hemorrhoids and it draws toxins out of the rectum.
Just
fat.
slice potato?
You can just grate them and use it as a
Yeah,
compress.
poultice, the compress.
Yeah, poultice, yeah.
You were talking about the water running out the nose. What about out the eyes? Is that the same thing?
It could be, but specifically the nose, the dripping is brain heat. And so then Then histamine, you know, they talk about histamine in mast cells. Histamine doubles in the transformation in the body processes, it doubles as a neurotransmitter. And the Kundalini stuff starts to make sense if you think of histamine as a neurotransmitter, right? And then people that have allergies generally are people that are evolving faster than their body can keep up with. Is one that was the biology of Kundalini and Gina Dixon's contention. Pretty interesting work, this book. A lot of this stuff I'm talking about comes out of that. There's different histamine receptors, it turns out, like there's the H1, the H2, and I was like, and I had allergies my whole life and thought I knew a lot about it until I read this book and her connection with consciousness and allergies and histamine and drippy nose, which I had so much in my life, and I definitely felt hot.
And say the title of the book again.
The biology of Kundalini. You can literally go on the web, don't do Google, but another browser, biologyofkundalini.com. And she turned this book into a sort of a PDF based website.
Okay.
There's a couple types of websites. There's the information based kind, the database website, and there's the PHP or something like that. There's two different types of websites. One's just more art based and one's more data based. This is a more data based website. There's very little art on it. But wow, so I downloaded the book into a PDF, and I have that in my computer on an external hard drive in case it ever gets lost, because it's such a brilliant piece of work that I want to have this the rest of my life. So I took her histamine chapter and took the Wikipedia and all the medical histamine stuff and made an article about histamine. It's still too much for most people to stomach, because there's foods which increase histamine. There's foods that lower histamine.
What's the bathroom?
Rain or something. Okay, we're going to be after 9 here, so I want to finish this. So comfrey would be a sour, partially. We could pass around. This is miner's lettuce, and it's reputedly high in vitamin C, and it's gone into flower, which means it's in foreplay stage. It's in foreplay stage. So this one is bland and sweet and a little salty.
Interesting to look at.
Very interesting to look at.
Right now.
This is plantain here. This is the leaf of it, and this is a very long,
Yarrow.
the very long
Yeah.
phallic
You taste it?
seed head. So this is where psyllium comes from.
That's like I'm.
Psyllium comes from the plantain seed, a type of plantain, Plantago psyllium. This is Plantago vulgaris or whatever, different one. Narrow leaf plantain, and there's a broadleaf one. So I'm going to do some sexual experiments. I think this whole thing is an aphrodisiac. I'm going to tincture some of these up, and I'll let you guys know. Let you know how it goes.
I know a lot of people would use it.
Yeah, you can try the leaf if you want. So this plant draws splinters out of the body. I've had success multiple times of just chewing it up, putting it on the splinter, coming back. I had a glass shard in my hand, put the plantain on overnight. In the morning, the glass shard was halfway out, just pulled it out, boom, done.
Okay.
Very impressive drawer. If you take it orally, intestinally, it purifies the blood by drawing the toxins right out of the body.
Wow.
Um,
More IVs. What's the name of that? Very good. Plantain?
plantain, and if you're watching the video, yeah, thanks for watching, and the lighting's much better. We're ending on a decent time tonight, not gonna go for 25 hours. So we've been talking about pH. Actually, I'm supposed to finish with this because so would it be skillful? Would it be skillful to check your pH if you're going into cleansing? Because we're kind of getting ready for the summer cleanse coming up in June 1st, kind of a long, broad campaign we're supposed to do. So wouldn't it make sense to have the right pH? Right? If you're too acidic, are you going to cleanse very well?
No.
It's going to be painful. If you're too alkaline, you're going to cleanse well?
Yeah.
No, it's going to be painful. The acidic people, so I typed a woman today, we'll probably end in a second on this. She was talking about how her body aches and pains increase after and during activity. some people, their body aches and pains occur when they're in the morning when they wake up and they've been at rest for a long time. So what's the difference in the two? pH wise?
Oh, the ones in the morning must be acidic.
It's the opposite.
Oh, really?
Really?
When your symptoms are aggravated at rest or being still, it's an alkaline condition, a parasympathetic dominant. And when they're aggravated when there's movement, then it's an acid condition, and it's usually a sympathetic dominant condition. There are this is a generalization, there are exceptions. Yeah. But generally, so that's why you give these people apple cider vinegar when they wake up with the stiff, achy joints in the morning, or this food is magic in the morning. Because I'm waking up with stiff, achy joints. Because generally protein types are parasympathetic dominant. People with high appetite, that's what drives the appetite, the parasympathetic nervous system. So therefore, if you have a very high appetite, you are parasympathetic dominant. I had a client that had no appetite, none ever. Didn't even want to eat. She said, I asked her, I said, so you could have a whole day go by and you won't think about eating? She said, oh yeah, I just get up, do my thing, coffee, no food all day, don't even think about it. That's a classic sympathetic dominant person. Because a sympathetic dominant person is more concerned with their muscles and being, moving around and not resting. And so generally the sympathetic dominant people have a hard time napping. And the parasympathetic dominant people like to nap too much. They're big sleepers. And then it's hard to generalize because that's what metabolic typing is about. You're looking at, are they acid, alkaline, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and what was the other one? Ketogenic or glucogenic, meaning they burn sugar or fat for energy. And so that's how you kind of attack people in metabolic typing. So there's a lot of variations. And so cleansing wise, if you're too alkaline, like if your pH is showing up consistently like very blue and purple, then if you cleanse, then you're probably going to feel worse when you wake up in the morning. If you're on the opposite side, the acid side, then if you cleanse, you're probably going to feel worse during the day when you're up and around. That's a little hint for, a little clinical pearl. And some people, they feel worse. Like this is how I know that if I'm, when you have fatigue, you're not sure if it's like fatigue from stagnation or sitting too long or genuine fatigue, but you haven't slept fatigue. I figured that out about 25 years ago. Because you're sitting in class, as a professional student for a lot of years, and sit in class and I'd feel fatigue, and I'd say to myself, okay, I'm gonna go do yoga, like some aerobic yoga for a few minutes. And if within 3 to 5 minutes I start to feel better, then I knew it's fatigue from stagnation. If I felt worse after 5 minutes of aerobic yoga, then I knew it was actual exhaustion and I needed to go take a nap. So if you start to move, you haven't been moving all day, you start to move and you feel better, then you know that your fatigue was just because you were sitting in front of a stupid device too long, or sitting too long, or not moving, because your lymph doesn't move unless you move. It doesn't move. So you got to move. And on that note, so how do you manage your pH? So apple cider vinegar is a good way to immediately acidify someone, but paradoxically, apple cider vinegar leaves an alkaline residue. What the body metabolizes it. So apple cider vinegar is one of those like snake oils. It's good for a lot of stuff, and it deactivates the pain. This guanidine thing I was talking about. You get guanidine from too much cooked meat, cooked proteinaceous foods, and then for some reason that seems to crystallize in the body and cause problems. So you deactivate this very alkaline guanidine compound, which makes pain unbearable at night in some people, with apple cider vinegar and chlorophyll. And Carol's leaving, so we're going to end this talk in a minute here. That's my signal.
So can I ask a question?
You want it on film?
I don't mind.
Okay.
So I have a very hard time detoxifying,
I know.
and so
Carol?
would I have better results
Okay.
if my pH was 7 when I started
Yeah.
detoxifying?
It would. And your main system, can I share this?
Yeah, sure.
Through the eyes. Remember I told you I wanted to look at your eyes and see what's going on there in the old paperwork. So your lymphatic system, which is the toilet for the cells, is slow. There's a bunch of different things pointing at that. So we need to increase the toilet speed somehow. So that's dry skin brushing. I have Melissa doing this. She's dry skin brushing and oil pulling and jumping and bouncing and coffee enemas. And then raw radish, raw onion, and raw beet salad, 1 cup of each a day minimum. So raw onion covers one area, raw radish another, and raw beet another. The 3 of those are salt, you know, the radish and the onion are the sulfur donors too. So we need to increase drainage.
Love you guys.
Right,
We got to increase drainage to the lymph system.
right.
Okay, good. And that's also red root and figwort and poke root. Those are the 3 biggies for the lymph system. And I have a lot of figwort growing. You could have a figwort plant, John. We could dig one up for you.
Okay.
They grow like a weed out here in the forest. They look like nettles, but they don't have the stinger on them.
Another word on the lymphatic system, if you go for a 15-minute run, you push as much lymphatic fluid through your body as just a whole day of just normal activity.
Thank you, Drew. So if you didn't hear that on the video, Drew said you do a 15-minute run, you move more lymph than if you were sitting in normal activity all day, right?
Yeah,
That's
Right.
wonderful.
not just sitting, but normal.
Just
daily
normal moving
activity,
around. Yeah, so on that note, that's kind of what, we're talking about cleansing without cleansing. And so if you want to cleanse without cleansing, the simple is eat more raw or 100% raw, bounce and jump, oil pull, dry skin brush. Enemas are certainly helpful. If you're really depleted, then you don't want to do a coffee enema. You probably want to do, an herbal enema, and then that's where you would talk to someone like me, and it would give you more of a nutritious enema versus a draining enema, But that way you can at least get some stuff moving. And there's a couple of the really easies, like hot and cold therapy. So an easy one, if you don't have a sauna, one of my easies was it's called a cold air bath. So in the morning, you strip naked and you run outside for maybe 10 seconds. You get yourself get cold and you run in and bundle up. And then you strip naked again and run outside for 10 or 15 seconds. And then every day or every week, you increase the amount of time.
Even better if it's snowing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or do what Drew does and jump in the ocean,
Right.
jump in the ocean on the change of seasons. And that's a great way to increase circulation, right?
You're alive when you hit the water.
Oh my God, you're alive. And on that note, well, you got a few winners here of the Aquan electrolyte thing. So next week we'll talk about the difference between an ion, a colloidal mineral. What are the other minerals? There's ionic, colloidal. God, there's so many names. They all kind of mean a little bit subtle different things. So we'll talk about that. And have a great week.